Day 51 of This Much Is True. Welcome to the studio of Loving Awareness. I'm not sure you're really going to get tonight's show, but I would just ask you to approach it with an open mind, because what I'm going to try and explain probably isn't too explainable. Let me explain. The weird, sometimes the banal, the veils of understanding. What am I on about? I kind of know, but I'm finding it hard to explain. But bear with. Sometimes life is uncanny, and it doesn't fall within the parameters of reasonable expectation. So, hopefully you can see, you can hear, you can taste, you can touch. But I'm not sure you can legislate for the instinct or even perhaps a kind of inner radar that is picking up transmissions, signals on a basis that falls outside of the normal senses of, as I said, of smell and touch and sight and hearing. Perhaps we get in touch with it when we sleep. So tonight's show isn't for all. In fact, it's a bit woo-woo. But I would ask you to approach it with an open mind. It's not a case of I'm going to be making it up as I go along, but rather referencing my own admittedly limited but curious experience of these extra things, or the unexplained even. Right at the moment, for the past few days, I'm feeling myself be called to a certain geographical area of Dublin 8, in the Inchicore area. And part of me is saying, you've just got this into your head, Mark, and you're fancying yourself that you're being called to this area. If I can elaborate a bit, sometimes we anchor songs with places, or indeed smells, with our youth or whatever. Sometimes you might get the smell of on a hot day of tar on the road, and it might bring you back to sometime in the 70s or 50s. This place is on an area off the Inchicore Road, and I anchor it to a time specifically around it must have been 1980 or 1979, because the hit I'm attaching to it is the Jams Going Underground. Some of you can Google, but I think that would have been 79-ish, maybe 80, possibly a tiny bit later. Going underground. Remember that? I think it made a very brief number one. In fact, I know it did, because I had an argument with a Jam Uber fan one day who insisted they never had a number one. I said, think again, they had a number one, Going Underground. And I must have been in my late teens or very early 20s when that song was out. Radio Dublin, which was a notorious, I've mentioned it before, a pirate station. It became notorious, but it certainly was a well-known pirate station, was in an old house. I think it was it the Sarsfield Road? But it was on Inchicore Road. Sarsfield House. And I remember this song playing, but I remember being in an area near there, and there was a depression down into the road. Now, I've been on Google Maps, and I don't see water near it. Yet I felt there was water near this area. I ventured down it one day, Possibly when I was, as I'm always boring you with my, when I was a young guy in sales, but I did have that area. So every so often I'd go off the beaten track to see if there'd be some businesses around. You'd be surprised where businesses are and little offices and stuff. So I'm just going to have to, and I might take a camera with me, I'm just going to have to go there. For whatever reason, and you might say it's just been fanciful. This song's in my head. That time I ventured down here. I felt there was water. It was like, almost like a water mill type area. Now, I know further back, definitely, there was, near the canal there was Riversdale Engineering. They used to make fire brigades, but that was a bit back further. So I'm being called to an area. Whether realistically I'm being called or I've gotten it into my head. But I got to go there. Have you ever had an experience like that? So again, I'm asking you to keep an open mind. Sleep is another thing that fascinates me. I have a repetitive dream. It can disappear for a few weeks at a time, but I do have it. And I know what it's about, and I'm not going to share it here. All of us have things that have affected us in some way, often on a traumatic level, but also, I think, on an emotional level. If you've been hurt, if you've ever, if you've ever experienced unrequited love, or that relationship that you just can't put behind you, or something that happened to you in your childhood, hopefully not the kind of things that we hear about these days, but just an event or a feeling of a time in your life that replays over and over again. Perhaps it was something you shouldn't have been involved with. Perhaps it was a loss. I don't know. Everybody to their own skeletons in the cupboard, if that's what they are. Or if you just picture yourself as rice paper. Life has a way of, of your experience just like a rice paper. Do you remember that old thing years ago, Kung Fu? He'd make, the Shaolin monk would make the guy walk on the rice paper. Anyway, you probably don't, but it's a very thin thing, and I think sensitivity is. So as you walk through or on life's rice paper, sorry, not a great analogy, but you will leave indentations, and some of them can be deeper than others. I am going to lose some of you tonight. It's going to be woo-woo central. But I just ask you, if you've an inkling of any interest in what I'm talking about, or you can relate, please do, as lovely Susan from Yorkshire did recently. And Jerry got in touch as well via the comments. Nigel listens in regularly, as does Ray and Shannon. But it'd be nice to hear from you on This Much Is True at protonmail.com. This Much Is True at protonmail.com. I'll put a link into it. So I have a repetitive dream. Sorry, rookie's mistake here. I've left my phone on, but I got to see it because it could be to do with business. No, I got to put it on silent now. No more interruptions. Now, if I can just say, look, that cost about 50 quid, right? And you could say, well, they saw you coming. But it's a magnet bracelet. I don't know how it works, but it's supposed to fix you up on some kind of an internal level, to do with your inner flow or your chi, is that what they call it, or ki? I don't know. My wife gets annoyed that I don't wear it as much as I should. And as we all know, some people wear a brass bracelet at times for rheumatism. How does that work? I mean, how does that work? So it could be to do... I'm going to move away from the dream. I'm just going to say I have a repetitive dream. And I often wake up with my heart beating. And it can go away. But I know it's going to be back. I know I'm going to suffer being in this place in could be the next few days, the next few weeks, next few months, a couple of times a year for sure. Do you have that? There's a song by a guy called Tom Robinson. Do you remember him? 2468 Motorway. And it's to do with, I'm trying to think of the name of it, but it was one of his lesser known hits, but it's a very haunting atmospheric song. And I think it is probably called Atmospherics, or it was off an album called Atmospherics. Atmospherics is probably what I'm talking about tonight. And if you look at the video of it, you will see how transient life is. There's a young couple versus you see them later in life as an elderly couple and some of the events that might have happened to them. Do you remember the refrain of it? Lie down on the bed, put another coffee on. Remember that? And listen to the radio. Ooh. He makes this beautiful reference about the stations. Do you remember years ago you'd put on the stations and at night the atmospherics would kick in, and he references sounds fading from Moscow to Cologne into the unknown. I am convinced there are realms of sensitivity that we deny ourselves purely because we're in touch all the time with the main senses. But if we can let our minds go, at times we can tune into things or feelings. And often I believe as well it's just patterns. It's patterns on a subconscious level that we repeat throughout the day. As you know, you can have patterns of thinking, either positive or faulty. There's times I'm sitting here and I will feel exactly the feelings, or something comes into my mind, maybe a job I was working on, but I feel it like it's now, but it could be well 18 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago back. But somehow or other I've caught the moment again. I know I'm losing some of you, but I hope I'm not, because I'm asking you, as I said, just to keep an open mind. I have a friend of mine recently, himself and his daughter were in an area of Limerick or somewhere like that. It was way down the country. And they were at an old kind of a monastery, I think it was. They were about to open a gate and they heard talking and chatter. And they were fully expecting a group of people to come up, so much so that my friend opened the gate to let them through. But when he went outside, there was absolutely nobody there. And his daughter said the same to me. He said, I can't believe it. There was no one there. We could hear them. We could hear them talking. And this place was quite remote, but there's a chance that it's a place that visitors would come to because it was an old monastery site, but it was out in the country. It was quite remote. He swears he heard people talking. He opened the gate. Nobody. So I went in. If you look for a video, Mark Manning, Banshee, you'll see some of the piece I did on the Banshee phenomenon of Ireland. Several months ago now. Things can exist that we're not aware of. Now, my family think I'm nuts at times, and you probably do as well. I know, for instance, I did reference it before. I know I put on 4 bits of toast in a toaster one day to bring up to my wife. And I went upstairs to get her cup or something to bring it down. She's her favourite cup to make her tea in. And I was ready to get the toast. The toast was nowhere to be seen. It was just gone. And one night I looked at our house and I could see that a certain wall, if not the door, is at an angle, very slightly, a few degrees at an angle. And I said to my wife and my friend, can you not see what I'm talking about? Can you see this house was built at an angle? And they laughed me off the stage. And I know if I got a spirit level or whatever way you do these things, this house is at a very slight angle. I'd like, if you could, maybe go Google. During the early 70s, there was a guy, I think for a while, he presented or was a presenter on, do you remember Tomorrow's World? One of those types of shows. What they would project for the future is kind of laughable now, because I think we've even superseded their wildest dreams. You know, they would talk about things like phones in cars and stuff when it really wasn't what you'd have, or if you did have a mobile phone, you'd be walking around with the batteries in a suitcase, all this kind of stuff. But this guy, he'd hailed from South Africa. His name was Lyle Watson. Lyle, Lyall Watson. He passed away, I think, in the 1990s. He wrote several books. The biggest seller, I think, which was called Supernature. Supernature, I'm sure you'll still find it on Amazon. I downloaded it to my Kindle there. And I think that was written around 1973 or 71. Something like that. And it looked at all kinds of things that we, within nature, that we just, how certain, like insects or even like little toads and things, they can regenerate limbs. Seriously, if you cut off a limb, it'll, within time it regenerates. I found it fascinating. He also had a theory about the shape of a pyramid. As we all know, there's all kinds of mysteries around the pyramids as we know them in Egypt. And his thing was, you remember the old razor blades like the Gillettes? After a while they become blunt and you'd have to throw them out. He would make a little pyramid either through cardboard or wood, I can't remember which, a small one. And he would put the razor blade, I know you probably think I'm nuts, underneath the pyramid, and within a day or so, it would be sharp again. And I know it was also around the time of, do you remember Uri Geller? He's still around. Uri Geller became friends with Michael Jackson. He's way out there. But Uri Geller was the infamous spoon bender. He could rub through a spoon or a fork and he could make it bend. Now, it could be telekinetics. Also, I'm talking about all this kind of stuff. When somebody's going to phone you, and they do, I often say, listen, if someone comes into your mind, phone them. Get in touch, especially if it happens 3 times. Get in touch. How many times have you thought of somebody and next minute they phone and you're kicking yourself because you know you're going to say to them, I was just thinking of you, and 9 out of 10 times people say, oh, no, you weren't. You were, yeah, blah, blah, you're away with... No, I was thinking of you. And suddenly the phone rang. Lyle Watson also, I think you'll find it on YouTube. If you Google 4 narrow windows, he relates a story that he got a call after Supernature was published from a guy in Venice, beautiful Venice. I was there a few months back. Part of the world I love so much. Myself and my wife love it. In fact, if I had the money, I think I'd just move to Venice. And he got a call off this guy who was a very ordinary man, family man. And he related the story. So Lyle said, I'll tell you what, I'll visit. And what it was his 6-year-old daughter had a bit of a party trick with a difference. So she looked at him going, oh, not again, Dad. And he said, no. He said, well, I'm trying to do the Italian accent. But he says, no, show Mr. Watson, show. Over dinner, he said, I'm going to show you what my daughter does. It's a party trick. And she would take a tennis ball and she'd rub it like it was almost like a little furry animal. And within a minute or so, it would invert so that the rubber end was now the surface of the ball and the furry bit was inside. Now that's, if you think about it, impossible to do. This guy, Lyle Watson, maintained not only did she do it once, she did it about 3 times. They couldn't fathom how this happened. And a few years after that, he got in touch with this Italian gentleman and says, you know what, I've got a TV crew here. Do you think your daughter could perform that? I know she's a bit older now. He said, yes, she is older. She did it once or twice at school. She got such a slagging, as we say here in Ireland. She got so kind of put upon as a figure of fun that her consciousness really kicked in terms of wanting to belong and be accepted. And she can't do it anymore. She stopped doing it because she was embarrassed by the attention she was getting of a negative nature. Like, I don't know, hints of her being a magician or a witch or whatever. I don't know. It upset the child so much she couldn't do it anymore. And there were several instances of this kind of thing. They had these microphones. And don't laugh, they inserted them in a saucepan of boiling water with eggs in them. And the vibrations went crazy. And the interpretation was the eggs were screaming in the boiling water. I know. I said keep an open mind. Also with plants. Again, the sensitivity that if you pulled a leaf off a plant, that it would actually react in pain. Again, they were picking these things up on the mics and the sensors they had. And also the fact that plants seem to be able to communicate. And classical music, certain kinds of music and light, of course, they can be beneficial for the growth of plants. Plants seem to like classical music. So I think I've probably said too much for tonight. Except, do you ever have phenomenon that you can't really explain? For instance, there's nights I'm here, and you might see 1 or 2 tonight. You could say they're dust, but I don't think so. I have witnessed sometimes in here that kind of phenomenon that you see, like known as an orb. I sometimes see orbs here. I think they're orbs. It's possible they are dust, but they come up and they behave erratically sometimes. You see them shooting across the screen, maybe once or twice. Most times I shoot. This is a pretty sensitive camera that's here. The reason you can tell that is look at the mic. Just look at the microphone. I mean, look. I mean, how pretty sharp is that for a webcam? This is quite an expensive webcam. It's called an Avermedia. It's not your usual cheap webcam. So it kind of can pick up stuff at times. Within 20 feet of here, there was a depression in the ground in the neighbour's yard. There was a suspicion it was either tunnels or an underground river. There is a tributary river from the Dodder, I think, that comes down not too far from this house. So that whole land, and the man who was working on it, he was 76 years of age. He said to me, I've never seen anything like this. And he said, I think it's either tunnels or a river. They filled it back up there recently. I was looking at, now that I'm going to lose you here, but I want to be straight up. I wouldn't take money for our cat. If you said to me, I'm going to give you €1 million for that cat, I wouldn't sell it to you. The reason is, I don't know how animals and humans work. Particularly, I have to say, cats are on a very... I know some people, I hate cats, and I get all that. I don't know what it is with people, but they don't like cats. And dogs are lovely, but dogs can be a big idiot at times. Dogs jump. The cat can say, fuck you, I'm going to do my own thing. Cat's quite a spiritual, very sensitive animal, as seen you know, how they were worshipped in Egypt and what have you. I look into the big pools in my cat's eyes sometimes. Or you see them, do you ever see the cat looking at you? You know, it's like a portal I'm looking at. This animal. And he's going to be he won't be replaced easily. I mean, this thing nearly talks to you. Every time I talk to him, he kind of meows back. Every time. He follows me like a dog around the estate here. I wouldn't take money for him. And to me, it's like, you could say I have too much time on my hands, I know, but I love this cat. And I'm sure if you've ever I've had pets all my life on and off, but this is the first one I've bonded with. He's getting old now as well. Yeah, I'm going to lose so many of you tonight. I'm really sorry if I've gone on. But I don't think I'm going to apologize too much, because I think you're mad if you just think sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell. That's the whole shebang. Stuff we are not in touch with. And perhaps at one point we were, and for some reason it was lost along the way. Maybe a big trauma happened to humanity way back that knocked this stuff, whether out of the pineal gland or, you're saying penal, yeah, right. But anyway, you know that gland they say that's up here in your head, between you, or the Indian people say like they have the little mark up here. Yeah. Good night.